Hey everybody, it's Holly here today with a new video for Marker Pop, and today we're creating a card using the newest release from My Favorite Things, using the Magical Unicorn set and the matching dies. I'm also using the Because of You set, and that comes with a die in it, and I'm also using the Diagonal Scent Strip cover-up. So I'm going to start out by taking the Diagonal Scent Strip cover-up and die cutting it from a piece of Tim Holtz watercolor paper, and then I'm going to carefully lay the pieces out that I popped out of it to the side here. I want to keep them in the order that they were in the cover-up. Then I'm going to use some distress inks, and I'm going to color each strip in a rainbow order. And I'm going to start with Wild Violet, one of last year's colors. Then I'm going to use some Salty Ocean. Then I'm going to use some Peacock Feathers, Twisted Citron, and then we Squeezed Lemonade, Pumpkin, and Candied Apple. Those are the colors I decided to use for my rainbow. And here I'm working backwards. I started with the purple. And this is so that as I go along, I can continue working over the distress ink without it rubbing off onto another color. I'm just using some scrap paper underneath it. And then I'm going to set them aside, and I'm going to dry them. Not dry them, I'm going to put them on a paper towel. So I'm going to put the strips on a paper towel, and then I'm going to spritz it with some water using the distress sprayer. And then after it sits for just a few seconds, I'm going to go ahead and blot the ink off with the paper towel. And this will help pull up some of the color. And then I'm going to go ahead and dry it with my heat tool. I have a heat tool with a high and a low setting, and I'm just using the low setting to just give them a little bit of dry. And then we're just going to set them aside for a second. Then we're going to take the cover up, and we're going to go ahead and add some liquid glue to the back side of it. And then we're just going to take a piece of scrap paper. It can be any kind of paper, and it's cut just a tiny bit smaller than the cover up. And we're just going to lay that down on the back side. This is going to give us a place where our strips can adhere to. So I'm going to go ahead and add some glue into each of the lines. And then I'm going to use my tweezers and put those diagonal pieces back into the cover-up, paper piercing it. I'm just putting them back in order. And even though we dried the pieces with our heat tool, you still want to make sure you don't stick your fingers on the distressed pieces too much, because your hands will pick up the ink and pull it off. So I'm using my tweezers to kind of push them down into place. And once I have that all set, I'm going to go ahead and take another piece of distress cardstock, watercolor cardstock. I'm going to trim it out to the size of the Because die from that Because You set. And I'm going to add some Stick It adhesive to the back of it. This is a double-sided adhesive that's from Ken Oliver, and it's called Stick It. I'm going to peel off one side of it and put it on the back of the distress cardstock. Just got to find the little starting point there. And then once I have that down, I'm going to go ahead and add some distress ink to the front of the cardstock. And I'm going to use some picked raspberry. And I'm pretty much going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to add the distress ink, covering the entire piece of the cardstock there. And then I'm going to go ahead and spritz it with some water. And then I'm going to blot it off with a paper towel. Give it a quick little shot with the heat tool. And then I'm going to lay the die cut over top. And I'm going to run it through my Big Shot machine a couple times to make sure it really cuts the die with all the intricate little letters. And then once you take it out of the Big Shot machine, you're just going to pop the pieces out. Again, you want to be careful not to handle it too much because you will pick up some of that ink onto your fingers. And I'm going to go ahead and peel off the backing. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiments onto the cover-up piece. And I've already got them lined up into my mini Misty. And I'm using one of the sentiments, I like you, from the Because You. And then I'm using the You're One of a Kind from the Magical Unicorn. And I just lined them up in my Misty, and I'm using some VersaFine black ink. Because I am using textured watercolor cardstock, that's the best ink that gives you a clear impression. Then I'm going to go ahead and pull off this adhesive on the back of the Because. Then using my tweezers because that adhesive is very sticky. And this is a lot easier to use than trying to glue the little pieces. Go ahead and lay that down. And then I'm going to add some Scotch foam tape to the back of it. I'm going to add a lot of Scotch foam tape to the back of it because it is a watercolor piece. I want to make sure it's going to stay nice and straight and not warp or anything. Then I'm going to go ahead and set that aside, and then I'm going to use the other half of that piece of watercolor paper using some Ranger Archival black ink. You could also use StazOn ink or any kind of black ink that's waterproof. And I'm using this because we're going to use the distress markers to color in the image. And I'm stamping the unicorn image onto the piece of watercolor cardstock. And then I'm going to use the distress markers and I'm going to color it in. And we're going to be using Pumice Stone, Smoky, or Hickory Smoke, Pumice Stone, Picked Raspberry, Tattered Rose, Squeezed Lemonade, and Spun Sugar are the colors that we're going to use. And then I also have an aqua painter. Then I just have a small acrylic block, and I'm just going to use that to scribble on with the marker. So when I first start out is I scribble onto the watercolor cardstock, and then I scribble a little extra onto the block so that I have it. Then I'm going to use the aqua painter, and this is just slightly damp. And I'm just pulling the color from the spot where I colored it directly onto the paper, and I'm pulling it out to the white area. And then once that area dries a little bit, then I go back in with the color that I directly put on the block, and I pick it up with the end of the dry aqua painter. I kind of dry the brush off there, and then I add a little bit more to kind of give it some highlight and shading. And I do the same thing for every color that I'm using today. Just want a little bit of a highlight, so I'm just bringing the color in, pulling from the darkest part into the white. And I'm making sure to dry the end of the paintbrush off each time. You can use a regular paintbrush and a cup of water for this. I just happen to have my aqua painter on my desk, so that's what I used. I'm not a super big fan of the aqua painter because you can't really control the water with it, so you'll see me drying it off there a lot. So I'm going to go with the Tattered Rose and just add a little line around the snout there. And the same thing, I'm going to pull from the color, and then I'm going to pull it into the white area. The distress markers work best on watercolor cardstock. It can be the Ranger's Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock or any kind of cardstock, watercolor cardstock that you have, or watercolor paper. The one thing about the Tim Holtz watercolor paper is you want to make sure you don't move that color around too much because the paper will start to pill up. And then here, after that one area dries a little bit, I go back in, picking up some of the color directly from the block where I scribbled it on. And that just gives me a little bit of a darker highlight. And I'm going to take the Pumice Stone marker and I'm going to draw a line, kind of an outline around the unicorn because it's supposed to be white. Just wanted to add a little bit of shading to it. I chose the Pumice Stone for the body so it has more of a warmth to it, as the hooves are Hickory smoke, which is more of a cool gray. So you can kind of tell the difference between the two. And then I'm just pulling that line that I drew out till it's pretty much just a little schmear, I guess you'd say. There's not a harsh line there. It's fairly soft. And you just pull that into the white area and it just kind of blends together. And then after I have everything colored in the way I want it, I'm going to go ahead and die cut the image using the coordinating Magical Unicorns die. And I'm just going to run that through the Big Shot again. Sorry, I'm kind of going off camera there a little bit. I had to keep reminding myself to make sure I looked up and saw where the paper was. I zoomed in here too so you could see the marker. Although it doesn't seem to be working very well. There you go. And then I did heat that with the heat tool just a little bit to make sure it was dry. Then I'm going to run it through the Big Shot. And then I'm going to use some Wink of Stella, and I'm using the yellow on the horn. And then I'm going to use the clear Wink of Stella all over the body of the unicorn to give it some nice sparkle. You do want to be careful when you're using Wink of Stella over Distress or any type of watercolor product because it will pick up the color and move it around a little bit. So you want to kind of work fast. Then I'm going to go ahead and add the front panel of the card to a top folding black cardstock. Just cut the standard A2 size, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 finished. And we're going to add some more of that Scotch foam tape to the back of the unicorn. And I'm putting a lot of foam tape on this. You don't need to do that much. I just really like to make sure my things stay down because they are watercolored. And I buy the foam tape in the giant rolls, so I have a lot of foam tape. So I'm going to go ahead and put that down with my tweezers, just a little bit over the word because. Then I'm going to use some of the Pretty Pink Posh dewdrops in the clear. And there I had a gum eraser. If you've got any areas where you put that glue down and it looks a little shiny, you can just take a glue eraser and just pick that up. And I'm going to use some Ranger Multimedia Matte to apply my dewdrops. This will dry clear and you won't see it through the little dewdrops. And that pretty much completes my card for today. Thanks for stopping in today. And here you can see I did 2 cards. I did change up the position of one of the colors on the other one, but it still looks okay. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend. See you later. Bye-bye.